Okay, on this half pint we're going to remove the whale tail and install an OD turntable retrofit kit. To do that, the first thing we're going to have to do is to remove the back screen. To remove the back screen, you're going to need a 1/8 inch Allen, a 3/32 Allen, and a 3/8 nut driver. The next step is to take off these button heads with a 1/8 inch Allen key. Okay, with the back wall removed, you're now able to access the 5 bolts that are attaching the whale tail to the machine. You'll need a 5/32 Allen and a 7/16 wrench for this. Also, while you're up here, you can remove and unplug your advanced sensor. With your 5/32 Allen, you'll just need to remove 1 socket head bolt. And then your advanced sensor just unscrews from your wire. Our next step is going to be to unwire or disconnect the vibrator from your control box. With your control box in the off mode, you'll use either a flathead screwdriver to gain access to your control box. In here, in the rightmost VFD, there's a plug. That plug pulls straight out, and then your security, you use your security key to undo your ground wire. And then with a small flathead screwdriver, you can unwire your vibrator from the VFD. And then keep this out because this is the same plug you'll use to wire in the OD turntable. To disconnect the wire from the rest of the control box, you'll just break your Velcro. Put your zip ties. And your vibrator wire will loosen from your plug connection. Okay, the final step to remove the whale tail, you'll need 2 1/2-inch wrenches, and you'll remove 3 shoulder bolts from the bottom of the 80/20 and from each side at the corner of the whale tail. now with all of our bolts loose, we're going to pop off these, and this whole unit's going to come off in one big assembly. With the whale tail off, you'll use your 3/8 nut driver to remove this top screen. There's 4 flange nuts holding it on.
So the next step is to mount a ledger bracket on each side, which will hold the turntable box. But it has 2 holes, and you only have 1. So the first thing we have to do is shoot a new hole.
Just doing this.
So for this step, you'll need 1/2-inch wrenches, a transfer of the right size if you have it. If not, just do the best you can with a Sharpie and a scratch awl, punch of some kind, hammer, and a drill, and assorted bits. Now what I'm going to do is move it to the other side so I can transfer that side separately. So if you've never drilled on stainless before, you drill fast and hard and you stop and let things cool. It usually pops through if it's nice and sharp. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to shoot this hole a little bigger, 3/8, which will give us a little wiggle room since we're doing this by hand. That's nice and sharp. Now what I want to do is shoot straight through, and I can see my pilot hole is dead center on the other side, which means I did something right. And I'm just going to shoot it from this side. There we go.
Our next step is going to be to hang our ledger brackets from the machine, and before we do that, we need to add a metal spacer so we don't crush our tubes. You'll notice that you already have one spacer in there, but we're going to add a second one for the second hole we've drilled. To do this, you're going to need, again, 2 1/2-inch wrenches, a hammer, and that's it. Get this in here effortlessly. So you use your wrench to hold the spacer to align it. How do we hang a ledger bracket into hardware? I'll take the bracket. See if I get that bolt through.
Yeah.
With holding that spacer in place, we're going to stick one of these 5/16 shoulder bolts through the hole just to keep our spot. We'll stick a washer and a nut on the other side to hold things in place. And then we'll do the same thing in front. Hot tip is, if you're having trouble getting these spacers lined up with the holes, you can stick a screwdriver in there and just wiggle it around and it'll line it up for you. Our next step is going to be to mount the 80/20 to the bottom of the turntable. We're going to do that by sliding these 4 carriage bolts in the channel of the 80/20 on the hole, on the side that's opposite of where the hole is drilled.
Next, we're going to hang the turntable box, and to do this, we're just going to flip it up and put the post arm into the brackets, and we'll slip in hardware up on top. So for this, we're going to need our benches, unless we're really tall. Next, we're going to pin the turntable box onto the ledger brackets with 1-inch 5/16 hardware.
So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to check flushness of our dead plate bar with the frame of the machine. You can do that just by rubbing your thumb across where they meet. This one needs to come down just a hair. To do that, I'm just going to use a rubber mallet and just hit it down until it's flush. As you said. Now that this is flush, we're going to level our turntable to the dead plate.
Go ahead and pin it to the dead plate bar side.
Okay.
Yep. Like pin it there. It'll be higher. Go ahead.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Well,
I don't know if
you're
you can
doing
see from
that.
there, but you can see this
I'm
is going
gonna
to
guess
come up like
this.
a quarter of an inch to be level.
It's looking pretty good.
Are you? Don't you?
Mostly look at this one. Much more I can get.
That's good.
Alex, we still have a little bit of play here. That's okay. So we'll get that now.
Okay. So this is all adjustable too, right? Now that we have things fairly level, we're going to get it exact by using this front ledger, which is slotted, and we're going to level that also to the dead plate bar. And all you need for this is a 5/32 Allen. And then we're going to do the same thing on the other side. Our next step is going to be to lay out our dead plate so we can drill and tap holes to attach it to the machine. When you're doing this, you don't want anything hanging into the machine for cans to catch on. You'll make it flush with your dead plate mounting bar. And we're going to use soft clamps to hold it into place while we drill. Alright, that looks good.
Also, before you begin to drill, you want to check and make sure that your slots on the front of the dead plate are lining up with the ledger bracket on the front of the turntable box. That looks swell.
Now that we have our dead plate laid out, we're going to go ahead and punch our holes and then pull the dead plate off to drill and tap it. Now that we have our holes marked, we're going to go ahead and drill. We're going to do the same thing we did before and start with a pilot and then step up to a larger drill. Now that the holes are drilled, we'll go ahead and tap them. We're ready to attach our dead plate. Now we're going to pin the front of the dead plate to the turntable box.
Before we put the turntable onto the half pint, first thing we want to do is just kind of pre-adjust these casters. We want to pre-adjust it so it's just a little higher than this wall. Now we can throw up the turntable. I can adjust the casters that are in place just from turning the screw from the bottom side. So before we put the motor assembly in, you can see we're pretty good. This is a good rough adjustment. We're just a little bit below the dead plate. And it's fairly balanced all the way around. Your motor assembly should come looking just like this. All we need to do is drop the wire through and drop it into place. Drop it into place with the electrical box facing the back of the machine. Now we'll get it from the bottom. pin the motor into place, I've got 5/16 by 3/4 button heads. I've already pre-greased all the holes that are the threaded holes. And so now what I want to do is I want to pin one side and then the opposite corner and then kind of mate them together. Smooth as butter. So the motor height adjustment, it slides up and down, just like that. So what I want to do is just leave enough tension so that it's up, and when we drop the turntable on, they'll mate up and it'll find its way home.
So now with the turntable in place, we're just going to spin it until you see your 6 holes line up. Now that our holes are lined up, we're going to go ahead and pin our turntable in place with these 1/4 by 3/4 inch flatheads.
So now it's time to pull the motor wire and dress it into the VFD. We're going to take it into the same connector that had the vibrator wire, and we'll just work that in there. If it's too tight because this wire is bigger, go ahead and take a pair of dikes and just clip that outer ring. Gives you a little play, but you still keep your seal. You should have some leftover Velcro from when you remove the vibrator. You can go ahead and just dress this motor wire. Okay, so you should have had, or you do have, the plug that you took out of this VFD, which was your vibrator VFD. So now we're just gonna, these are already pre-marked, U, V, and W. You just match them up and plug them into this connector. Next, I'm going to put the ground wire back at that terminal. You need some kind of a T20 driver to get to that torque screw, and then I'm going to plug this back in. This time, we can fire up the machine. We'll let it boot. And your retrofit kit should come with a handy-dandy flash drive. And we're going to use this to reprogram the machine for the turntable program. This generally works best if you hot swap it. There's a USB jack in the back of your HMI. And this guy will just plug right in there. Once you plug them in, a whole new menu shows up on the front of the HMI. To put the new program into your machine, you see this menu. You want to go to the PLC first. So we've got version 2.0, 0819. This is our latest version right now. You may even have a later version. Once the function is completed, just hit acknowledge and you go back to the other menu. Now at this point, we have a PLC program that doesn't match exactly. So I may have to confuse it all over again. If when the HMI program and the PLC program don't agree and it freaks out, just hot swap it again. This menu should come right back. Now I'm going to program the HMI. Once the HMI is reprogrammed, just hit acknowledge, and hopefully everybody is happy. We're now done with this, and I'm going to remove the flash drive. Now our PLC is reprogrammed. It's happy. So all we got to do now is recommission the VFD, and for that, we send you a brand new lens BOP. Just plug in the BOP by putting the tabs up and swinging down. From stop, I'm just going to hit enter. It wants to know which group. I'm going to group 2 first. Then I'm going way up to 220. This is acceleration time 1. We don't want our turntable to turn on and off too fast, so we're going to make it about 3 seconds. To get it to save the parameter, I have to hold enter until it acknowledges that it's saved. Now the parameter is saved. On the deceleration time, I want to check and see what it is. Half a second is fine, so I'm just going to move on. I'm going back, and now the next parameters I want are in group 3. In group 3, I started in the same place at 320 instead of 220. These are my motor parameters. I have rated speed. The vibrator went very, very quickly, so we're going to drop this down to 1600 RPM. I'm going to set this to 1600. Again, I just press and hold enter. I already know that's 60 hertz. The next thing I want to look at is the power factor. 25 watts is how many kilowatts? 0.025. I'm going to set this to 0.03. Next parameter I want is max motor speed. I'm going to take this down to about 1800. Motor current. I definitely want to reset the motor current. The current motor is 220 milliamps. I'm going to save that and move on. Before you fire up the turntable, we're going to go to settings. This works very much like your previous program. The turntable is bidirectional, and right now it's set at 50 hertz. That's most of the speed, 20 to 60, so we can start right there. First thing we want to look for is to see if you have any rubbing back here or if you're rubbing anywhere up here. Since we kind of did some presets, we know we're in a good place. I don't see any rubbing anywhere. I don't know. I like it.
I do too.
But we're professionals. What should they do? They should keep with it until they get it right. You can put that in. If you find an anomaly on the side of your turntable, you can go ahead and take a file and just drag that edge while it's turning. You can just let this go for several cycles and you can try to wear that down a bit. It usually shouldn't be a problem, but if something's a little out of whack, this can be helpful. There are two high gate pieces. They're probably not on your turntable the way it's shipped. Everything should be pre-greased. But you go ahead, there's two thumb screws, and we're just going to get these high gates into place so that we can get the top bar on the machine. We're ready to put on the top bar. This is your top bar assembly. It has two diverter flaps and it has your sensor already more or less in the position that you might want it. We're going to take a carriage bolt and just get it on the ends and pop it onto this guy.
So to mount this, we use a 5/16 carriage bolt, slid it in the 80/20, and then got both ends flush, and then just put a nylon, a flange nut on the other side. In case your advanced sensor wire doesn't reach to where your new sensor is, we've included an extension wire, and this just pairs up real simple. You'll find that there's a slot groove it has to fit in. And then once that's tight, you have your extension.
I'll plug this into the advanced sensor, and then Luke can slide in some T-nuts.
Including cable stays and a 10-30-second flange bolt.
But it'll move easily in and out of those. And the reason we did it this way is because when you need to break off the top bar to get through a low door or something, then you can take the whole assembly all at once. This fascinating piece of metal is the feed gate assembly, and this is how the cans come off the turntable. So all we need is to plug it into two of these offsets, and to do that, we have some 1/4" screws, and we just get them down on these slots. So to adjust this, what I want to do is I'm going to set it just so it is tiniest bit lower than the turntable itself. Then I'll stiffen it up a bit. What I need to do is get a can. We're going to take a look, see how this is. So we want this pretty tight, but we also have a railing that's going to go through here. It shouldn't touch, but I'm going to leave it a little room. So what I want to do is just take this guy in a little bit. I need to even this out. So this hardware over here is all 5/16, so you just need 1/2 inch wrenches. This guy. That'll be fine for now. Tighten them down. Yep. This machine is going to turn clockwise, and this is how we're going to feed. So our feed will be out here, which means we want to sample right in this zone. So I'm going to move the photo eye over, and then we'll adjust it. So the first thing I want to check is to make sure that this is in dark mode. There it is. So when there's an object that's close enough or reflective enough, it will turn the sensor on. So I'm going to say that needs to be a little more sensitive. So clockwise is more sensitive. You can see inside the can, which is fine, but we mostly just want it looking at the edge. There we go. I like that. So to check that, we're going to look at the I/O help screen.
To get to our I/O choke, we'll go help, I/O check, sweep I/O check. It should be white when it doesn't see a can and green when it does. That's how you know you have your sensor working and set.
Your advanced sensor is a diffuse sensor. We put it in dark mode because we want it to give us a sensor output when there is no can, and when we block it, we want to see that light go off. So there's a dial here. It should already be set to dark mode, and it should actually be preset a little bit to about your range. It has a range of about 5 centimeters, so it should only be able to see the top of the can as it goes by, and it'll trigger it. Even with the mirror finish, it should never be able to see the bottom.
The next thing we're going to do is install these L brackets. You have carriage bolts that are already installed onto the machine. Be careful not to push the bolt back into the machine. Just be gentle with it. All you need to do is use your hands, put your L bracket on top, and then put that flange nut right back on. That's it. Alright, our next step now that we have our L brackets up is to mount our plastic railing. To do this, you're going to need a 5/32 Allen 7/16 wrench and some 3/4 inch flathead hardware with 2 thumb wheels and some flange nuts. There's an angled cut that's going to go towards the back of the machine. Your thumb wheels are going to go on the front. Get this guy flush with your frame, you just loosen this bracket, slide it in tight, and then put some more tension on it.
So before I put on this access cover, I'm going to go ahead and tighten up the motor because it's very happy where it is. And next, I'm going to lock the casters in. For that, we have 5/16 flange nuts.
Okay, the next thing we're going to do is put on our cover. It's just going to slide over your motor mount, and those holes will go over the button heads on the top. 1/4 inch hardware.
Now all you gotta do is button up the screens that you took off the machine, and then you'll be ready to go. On the half pint that you have, your sweep carriage bracket probably looks like this. we've ground this edge down, and the reason we did it was we're just trying to get a little farther onto the dead plate before we actually touch the dead plate. You want to get as far onto the dead plate as possible. So you might decide to take the time to pull this bracket off and grind that edge down, and that way you can put your front proc sensor up just a little bit and you'll maybe get another inch out of it.
Okay, before you do your first layer of cans, a good trick is to actually take a can and set it under your sensor and block that sensor light. When your LED light turns off, then the cans will raise to their height, but the sweep won't push the cans forward, so you can double check that your height is correct. If you don't do this, when the cans get to their height, the sweeps are going to push them forward until that sensor is blocked, so you could have a big mess on your hands.
That's awesome. Another important factor is you want to set your diverter flap pretty low off the deck. We've got 16 ounces here, and even though the can itself seems tall, where the force is down low. So the lower your flap is off the deck, the better off you are when it comes to keeping your cans from tipping over. And that's how you install your Half Pint turntable or your Half Pint OD.
Easy as that.